The prince ruthlessly threw his newlywed wife into the abyss. Within less than a minute, the princess's life plummeted from heaven to hell. Fortunately, the vines broke her fall, saving her from certain death. When she regained consciousness, the princess believed it had been an accident and cried out for help, but there was no response from above. Looking at the scattered jewelry around her, she realized she wasn't the first girl to be thrown down here. Devastated, the princess burst into tears, regretting that she hadn't heeded the warnings of a courtesan. A month earlier, royal envoys had unexpectedly arrived in her kingdom, proposing marriage to their eldest princess and offering a lavish dowry. She and her family of 4 embarked on a long journey by ship to the wealthy royal territory. The opulence of the palace left them awestruck, feeling as if they had stepped into a grand wonderland. Her doubts vanished the moment she saw the prince. He was not only handsome, but also polite and humble, and even her younger sister was overjoyed for her. However, her stepmother suddenly urged her to cancel the wedding, citing an uneasy feeling about the queen's demeanor. The princess dismissed this as paranoia and decided to proceed with the marriage. On the wedding day, 3 maids dressed her in an elaborate gown. First, they fitted her with a crinoline and a stiff bodice, lined with iron plates to ensure perfect posture, tightening it to the point where she could barely breathe. Then came the voluminous sleeves, elegant cuffs, and a sachet of resin for natural fragrance. Under her delicate veil, the princess radiated beauty, much to her sister's envy. Although the wedding dress was extravagant, the ceremony itself was modest, and none of the royal family members seemed particularly joyful. After the queen placed a crown on her head, the princess officially became the prince's wife. According to royal tradition, the couple had to climb a mountain for a ceremonial rite. The attendees wore eerie masks, starkly contrasting the joyous atmosphere of the wedding. The ceremony began with the queen recounting the legend of the first king, who sacrificed his 3 daughters to a dragon to secure peace for the kingdom. She urged the princess to honor the sacrifices of their ancestors. Then, the queen drew a dagger, cutting both the prince's and the princess's palms and pressing their hands together as a symbol of bloodline unity. With the ritual complete, the couple was finally free to retire to their bridal chamber. The prince insisted on carrying the princess across a bridge, but just as she smiled blissfully in his arms, the prince flung her into the abyss. The princess tried to climb back up, but the steep, moss-covered walls were impossible to scale. Helpless, she noticed a faint glow emanating from a cave behind her. Picking up a dry branch as a makeshift weapon, she cautiously ventured inside, only to find the light coming from a burning bird. Compassionately, she extinguished its flames. Before she could make sense of the situation, she was horrified by the sight of dead birds scattered around. Trembling with fear, she prayed for her mother's protection. Unexpectedly, the word "mother" awakened a terrifying voice from the darkness. It was a dragon, speaking in human language. For centuries, the dragon had curled up alone in the dark cavern, waiting for the arrival of sacrificial maidens. Its words made the princess glance at her palm, finally understanding the true purpose of the blood bond ritual. However, the dragon was not in a hurry to kill her. After all, it had waited so long to have a new toy. The princess sprinted desperately as the dragon unleashed its searing breath in pursuit. Luckily, she ran fast, but the growing sound of heavy breathing signaled another wave of fire was imminent. With no path ahead, she frantically scanned her surroundings and spotted the charred corpse of a young girl who had died not long ago. If she stayed, she would face the same fate. Determined to survive, the princess squeezed into a narrow crevice, but her voluminous gown got stuck at the entrance. As the dragon's flames drew closer, she struggled with all her might, tearing the gown apart just in time to escape. Although she avoided the full blast, the heat scorched her leg, leaving her with a severe burn. She quickly removed the iron plate from her bodice, cutting strips from her skirt to bandage her wound and ease the pain. Then, taking the resin sachet from her waist, she used the embers on the ground to light it, creating a small but precious source of light. Using the faint glow, she groped her way forward, but as she crawled through a narrow passage, she suddenly slipped through a crack in the stone wall, landing hard on the ground below. Worse still, the resin had burned out, plunging her into complete darkness. Refusing to give up, the princess spent hours feeling her way through the cave. Finally, she saw a faint blue glow ahead, but a bottomless chasm blocked her path. She tore off the puffed sleeves of her gown and placed several glowing bugs inside, crafting an improvised lantern that would not extinguish. With light to guide her, she moved quickly. Not long after, she stumbled upon a small pool, parched. She bent down to drink, but found the water overrun with moss, making it undrinkable. Fortunately, icicles overhead dripped clear water. Tilting her head back, she sipped from the melting drop, closing her eyes in relief. Unbeknownst to her, the icicles were melting rapidly. She dodged just in time as a torrent of fire struck, revealing the dragon had tracked her through the scent of her blood. Seeing her hiding, the dragon remained calm, confident this was merely her futile attempt to escape. The princess noticed a message scrawled on the nearby stone wall. "This place is safe. The dragon cannot enter." Clearly, another girl had fled here before her, but when she spotted skeletal remains scattered on the ground, it became evident that the girl had ultimately died of entrapment. In her daze, a vision of a girl named Victoria appeared before her. Jolted awake, she felt a sharp itch on her burn. To her horror, the glowing insects were feeding on her leg. Disgusted, she pulled them off, only to discover her burn had healed significantly. Could these insects have healing properties? She found a map etched into the wall by a previous victim. According to the map, the exit lay under the sun's position. Memorizing the route, the princess tore off her cumbersome skirt and the treacherous prince's cravat. After carving her name into a rock, she set off with her glowing lantern, moving lightly and swiftly. To her relief, the journey was uneventful. Finally, as she turned the last corner, sunlight flooded the path ahead. At that moment, the princess discovered a crown inscribed with the name Victoria. This realization filled the princess with renewed determination. Without hesitation, she tore her clothes into strips, wrapped her hands and feet, and used the crown as a makeshift rope, hooking it onto the crystal pillars to climb upward, bit by bit. Just as she was nearing the exit, the dragon, following her scent, appeared below and let out a terrifying roar. But fortunately, the crown hooked onto another crystal pillar just in time, narrowly saving her life. Finally, she pulled herself out of the cave. Ahead was the vast blue sky, just as the map had depicted. Overjoyed, the princess quickened her pace, but as she descended, she spotted a pair of horses at the foot of the mountain. She shouted for help, but in the next moment, she realized the dragon had anticipated her moves and knew there was no escape. Forced back, the princess noticed markings on a nearby wall warning of the danger ahead. It appeared Victoria had failed to escape after all. The princess fell into despair, waiting for the dragon's fiery breath to end her life. Unexpectedly, distant shouting broke the silence. It was her father coming to rescue her. The dragon immediately turned its attention to the intruders, giving the princess a slim chance to survive. Concerned for her father's safety, she quickly retraced her steps. Her father and the guards had descended into the heart of the dragon's lair using ropes, unaware of the terrifying creature awaiting them. The dragon appeared moments later, exuding an aura of death that froze everyone in fear. Meanwhile, the princess accidentally stumbled into the dragon's nest and discovered the corpses of 3 baby dragons. Remembering the queen's words, she finally understood the dragon's vengeance. Once, the dragon had lived peacefully, but humans had labeled her as evil. One day, the king and his men invaded her home and cruelly slaughtered her 3 hatchlings, the last of her kind. Consumed by fury, the dragon transformed into a vengeful beast, incinerating everyone present except the king. She spared him to exact a punishment worse than death. Each year, he would have to sacrifice 3 of his daughters to her, forcing him to experience the agony of losing his children. Hiding behind a rock, the princess watched as the dragon captured her father with her tail, pinning him to the ground. The dragon demanded he sacrifice another daughter, but the king refused to comply. Enraged, the dragon killed him on the spot. While the dragon chased the fleeing guard, she quickly climbed back up the rope. Halfway through, the dragon returned, launching fiery blasts in her direction. In her panic, the flames narrowly missed. Wasting no time, she leaped onto her father's white horse, escaping the cave as the furious dragon gave chase. Just as the dragon was about to catch up, the princess cleverly dismounted and hid beneath a rock, successfully avoiding detection. However, the dragon's wrath knew no bounds. When she realized her target had vanished, the dragon unleashed a fiery rampage, setting the landscape ablaze. The chaos spread to the kingdom, causing mass panic. The royal court decided to sacrifice the princess's younger sister in her place. Hiding in the valley, the princess waited until the flames subsided before emerging. But just as she thought she was safe, she learned of her sister's imminent fate. Resolute, the princess decided to return to the dragon's lair to save her sibling. This time, her mindset was entirely different. She returned to the very rope bridge where she had once been abandoned, swiftly untying a rope and descending to the cave's depths. Familiar with the lair's layout, she navigated it effortlessly. This time, she also learned to mask the scent of her blood with foul-smelling mud. Equipped with determination and newfound knowledge, she pressed forward. With her trap ready, she gripped her father's treasured sword and prepared for her final act of vengeance. Meanwhile, the dragon placed the princess's sister next to the corpses of her hatchlings, waiting patiently for the princess to appear. Hearing a sound in the distance, the dragon assumed it was the princess and rushed to investigate, only to discover it was the sound of a falling helmet. The princess had already sneaked closer. Her sister, however, had injured her leg and couldn't walk. Seeing the dragon returning, the princess quickly hid her sister behind a nearby rock. At the perfect moment, the princess confronted the dragon, explaining how the royal family had deceived her all along. However, the dragon refused to believe her, convinced that the princess, carrying the royal bloodline's scent, was complicit. The dragon unleashed a burst of scorching smoke, but the princess leaped into a nearby pool of water, narrowly escaping death. When she emerged, she was severely burned. At that moment, her sister tossed their father's sword toward her. Before the princess could pick it up, the dragon pounced, pinning her to the ground. With a desperate cry, the princess grabbed a shard of iron and stabbed the dragon's eye. Summoning her remaining strength, she gripped the sword with both hands and drove it into the dragon's neck. The dragon, gravely wounded, staggered toward the princess, but she was too exhausted to flee. Just then, the princess noticed dust swirling near the rock wall ahead. Drawing courage from her resolve, she turned to face the dragon and declared her final stand. Enraged, the dragon prepared to unleash another fiery blast, but to its shock, it realized it had been outmatched by a mere human. Defeated, the dragon collapsed, seeking only death. The princess raised her sword but hesitated, realizing that the true source of evil was the royal family, not the dragon. Instead of killing it, she found blue healing insects and placed them on the dragon's wounds. Not long after, back at the palace, the royal family held another wedding to deceive and sacrifice an innocent girl, the final offering of the year. As the ceremony began, a coin rolled to the queen's feet, catching everyone's attention. Turning to look, they saw the princess confidently striding into the hall. In front of the stunned crowd, she ascended the platform and exposed the royal family's treachery. The queen, unrepentant, dismissed the princess as a lone rebel. Unaware of the terrifying roar that followed moments later, the dragon appeared, her presence silencing the room. After escorting the princess to safety, the dragon unleashed her fury, incinerating the palace and the lies and sins of those within. As the flames roared, the princess walked out of the castle, her resolve unshaken. Behind her, the dragon stood guard, reborn from her vengeance. From that moment on, the first dragon mother was born, began a new chapter in her life.